Reviewing this year's progress, let me say that we have been highly effective in conditioning the people's minds to accept our solution to the world's problems. The energy crisis here in the United States was exceptionally successful worldwide, and we expect similar success with our upcoming food shortage. Our labor leaders have made great progress by causing confusion and work stoppages in all areas of the world. The dollar is being devalued even faster than we could have hoped. Politically, the public has lost total confidence in any form of government. As you know, we ourselves do not need to hold any visible office of leadership. As a matter of fact, it's better that we do not. If we control the finances, news media, food, transportation, energy, we control everything. If we continue on our present course, it is my opinion that we could present the devil himself as a world leader, and the people would accept him.
Wah, 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 wah.
I like that.
Everybody, another Esoterror podcast. I just wanted to open up with that particular one. Is Delaine and I are the guy climbing through the ventilation shafts to get the word out. What's up, Delaine? How are you?
I'm doing well. I like how the video has the Trinity, you know, the triangle, and it has
It's interesting.
Japanese.
Like it seems like something relevant somehow, but it's also such a unique symbol that it could be anything. And that shit is so on point in terms of predictive programming, it makes my head spin.
Well, I actually feel like it's really relevant to the things that I've been talking to you about, like what I was telling you, that we came from the one that gave us two, and we became the trio, right? The Trinity, the tree of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely a lot of occult.
Yeah. So good. So what was the name of the movie? It's get the ads out of here. Early Warning, 1981. I'm going to have to watch the whole thing one of these days. It seems very reminiscent of like They Live.
Is that from the George Orwell thing you were telling me about?
The about 1984 and the Wikipedia article? Yeah, that was something fucked up, is that they're scrubbing the internet so hard, is that usually they have bullet points of whatever subject it is you're looking for on Wikipedia. One of the bullet points previously that I had seen just within the last year is they had a bullet point regarding the 2 minutes of hate. And that's an element within George Orwell's 1984, is that Big Brother would grant the masses 2 minutes out of every day or whatever period of time that they could just scream about the enemies that the state supported that they make. And so they had the 2 minutes of hate. That's been completely scrubbed from the Wikipedia note, which is one of the most important concepts in the book that we're seeing today, which is something that we're going to get into, talking about all of this hullabaloo involving nuclear scare, total Armageddon scare via North Korea, Russia, and otherwise. But before we get into that, as you did all of the decent groundwork when it comes to establishing the archetypes, and then talking about the chakras and a lot of the elements that factor into the chakras, being what benefits each or what might also negate each.
Well, I do want to do that in another episode. I have just a little bit on the chakras right now. Yeah. And then also on the 7 Hermetic Principles. These are things that we just wanted to really go over in this episode since we've been mentioning it. We do want to flush them out more throughout each podcast. I guess I'll start with the archetypes, but I don't know if you want to bring up something on Carl Jung, since these are his archetypes, so we could give the viewer maybe a description of who Carl Jung is, if they don't know.
You know, I really need to read more Jung and get more familiar with him. I would have the most layman's description is that Carl Jung was like the foremost thinker of thoughts, in a way that he defined shadow work and understanding what it is that we have within our desires, our issues with others, the way that we project, the way that we perceive. And he broke it down in, I would say, like primarily a wholesome way of just knowing thyself better and understanding the way that you're interacting with even unforeseen circumstances to benefit yourself.
Yeah, and he's a Swedish philosopher, and I was telling Adam the other day something I didn't realize till I was listening to Jordan Peterson, but he was saying that there's people that speculated Carl Jung was an anti-Semitist, which I didn't hear that before, but he's older than us, so he may have known something we didn't, because this is after Operation Paperclip had happened here in America, and we had brought over Nazi scientists. Carl Jung, actually, at the time, it was reported after his death that he was actually spying on Hitler for the U.S. government and reporting on Hitler's mental condition to the Allied forces. So, and that's what I was telling Adam, that I thought maybe people thought he was working with the Germans, and that's why they thought he was anti-Semitist. But
what I think it would make more sense is that if you look at Kanye today, is that they're calling him an anti-Semite because he actually called out the fact that the owners of the music industry and the media industry are demographically Jewish. It's not to say that it's an evil Jewish agenda. All that Kanye really had said is that, well, these are primarily older Jewish men, and everybody's like, that's anti-Semitic. And it's like, no, that's the per capita of who owns the media, is that it's older Jewish men. That's not neither here nor there, good or positive, negative or positive. That's the reality. And you could see, if you go back in time, I'll pull up a clip here in a second, is that they will always smear anybody as a commie, as an anti-Semite, or a right-wing radical extremist, right? It's all just slander. And I would imagine that the reason that Carl Jung got branded with that is that he was making a lot of points that would have brought up more personal empowerment in the face of the state, whereas the state couldn't really allow that.
So, I mean, like I told you before, I think if he would have referred to him as Zionist rather than old Jewish men, then it probably would have not, the wordplay wouldn't have got him so trashed as it did.
Right.
I mean, but what he's saying is the truth. And after World War II, there's a lot of Zionists, and I'm not speaking on the Jewish people, but the actual Zionists, the people on top, that put themselves in very high political places of media, all kinds of things where they control the worldview. And all I could say about that is that is part of that cabal that we call they, or the Illuminati, or the whatever people want to call them.
I could be totally wrong, but I don't think that there is an established Zionist that is also Jewish. I think that Zionism are people of Christianity and Catholicism that are witnessing, or they are propagating Armageddon, or the New Testament, the Last Testament, and they are doing so via Judaism and Israel and Jerusalem and Gaza. Is that I could swear that I had seen on good faith and had done some research previously, but I might have it wrong now, is that I don't think that Zionism really has a whole lot to do with anybody who's actually Jewish.
Well, see, because the reason why it's like that is, well, first of all, in the Kabbalah, they talk about the Messiah being in hell for his things that he did here on earth, which is a big thing that people look down on Judaism for. Another thing is that you have Revelations chapter 2, verse 9, Revelation chapter 3, verse 9, where the Messiah himself is warning John, or Yehukanan, in the Revelations vision, he knows thy works and thy tribulations of the people that claim that they are the Jews, but who are not the Jews, but are in fact the synagogues of Satan. And only one people in the world worship in synagogues. And again, I'm not attacking the faith, and I'm not saying every person's a part of it.
Or you are transcribing what has already been said. You don't have a dog in that fight. You were just describing what has been written down.
Yeah, and so when you see that 501c or whatever on a business, that's a Zionist funding that business. Okay, so I mean, it's definitely promoting the agenda that we see, right, to the establishment. So they're definitely manipulating the way that we perceive the world. Not to say that it's necessarily a good thing, because if you look at the Jewish people, right, they all agreed that they were meant to suffer because of the curses of Deuteronomy and Numbers. Okay, and as an entire people, they believe that. They believe that they deserve the suffering for the things that they've done as a people. Now, that was carried along in a single race, okay? And right now, what they do with esoteric symbolism and what they do with these occult knowledges or occult groups is they portray fear to us. and they create this group mentality, just like with the Jewish people, where they believe that there's that we have to suffer and that God made us to suffer, which I disagree with, because, you know, like you and I talked about, Adam, is that we do this to ourselves. God didn't do this to us. We do it to ourselves.
Yeah.
Our punishments, our torment, everything. It's like a narcissist who's sitting alone in the room and they're wallowing in their own shit, basically, right? And they know in their own minds that I did this to myself. And because of that, it's what causes their depression. It's just they don't know how to get away from doing that to themselves. So they just continue the cycle.
They project. It's their shadow person, their darkness that is projecting this outside of themselves instead of meeting it head on and trying to resolve it. Back to Carl Jung.
Yeah, so back to Carl Jung is that, like I was telling Adam, to learn the archetypes, he was studying schizophrenic patients, and he was trying to learn if babies in fact start with a clean slate, or do we have some sort of pre-planned destination in our brains, in our genetics, whatever it is that causes us to develop our personalities and egos the way they are. And through studying schizophrenic patients, he found that they all relate to certain archetypes, and these archetypes, they're in every story we have. And so he created what is the 12 archetypes. So you may look out there and you may find that there's less archetypes. You might find that there's more archetypes, but we're just going to do Carl Jung's 12 archetypes is what we're going to really break down. And I don't know if we're going to break them down completely, but we're just going to touch on them since we talk about them in the podcast.
Yeah.
So number one is the hero. And the hero is in every religious story. He is what the savior, the Messiah character is. It is what is represented by our collective unconsciousness. And usually the hero is overcoming obstacles, and those are traits of the hero. And then you have the magician, who they're all about knowledge and seeking knowledge, and they're about transformation, being transformative, even with themselves or the world around them. And then you have the number 3, which is the outlaw, and they usually breed revolution. They're also revengeful types, and they could be kind of a hellion. The explorer, which is number 4, they seek new adventures, and they're all about living life to experience life. That is what an explorer's archetype is. And so before I go any further, what an archetype is the archetype is the original that everything else is copied from. So it is the basis that we're putting categories into, basically. So number 5 is the sage. And like I was telling Adam, this is what I feel like I relate to the most. But again, all of us have each of the archetypes in us. We represent each different one in different phases of our life. But there's some that stand out stronger than others. For me, it's the sage, because the sage is seeking truth. They're a perfectionist. So they'll go deep into the knowledge, because the knowledge they want to present, they want it to be the best of the truth. And they want to share it with the rest of the world so that we're all in the same boat together and we can share this knowledge and become better.
What would you say is the difference between the sage and the magician? Because there are a lot of common traits there, whereas the magician seeks knowledge and then applies it in a very active way, where they interact and incorporate the knowledge in active practices, whereas the sage...
So the magicians are using knowledge in a transformative way. They're using it to either transform the world, transform themselves, transform people around them, right?
Yeah.
And with sage, what they're using the knowledge for is to help others, and to help themselves, to help others, help us grow, right? It's not necessarily trying to transform. I guess they're the same thing, basically. You know, one's transforming and one's growing. So I guess this goes back to what I was telling you about the difference between the Western world and the Eastern world beliefs, is that here in the Western world, you might have a child ask their mother, how was I created? And in China, a child will never say that because they believe in nature, and nature is creation. So nature grows out of itself, right? You have something, a seed, and this seed is going to grow into a beautiful tree, but it grows outside of itself. It wasn't created. Nature just happens. Nature grows outside of itself. Whereas here in the Western world, we perceive that something has to be physically created by something to look the way that it does. There's not like a cocoon phase of metamorphosis, right? It's that it was a seed, then it was a sapling, and now it's a tree, basically.
Yeah.
You know, we don't look at the creation process the same way that the Eastern world does. So with number 6 is innocent, and it's strength from they gain their strength from trust, and they like to search for solutions. They're very what's the word I'm looking for? Very well, I mean, they're innocent. Sometimes they could be perceived as naive because of their innocence.
Number 6, it sounded like you said innocent. What is it?
Yeah, it's innocent.
Oh, it is innocent. Okay, go ahead.
And number 7 is the creator, which, like the name states, is that they're very creative. They like to make things. They're attracted to anything unique and unusual because they could perceive anything that is out of the ordinary as a piece of art, or that they could do something with it and create something that's a piece of art out of something that people might think is ugly. You have the ruler personality, number 8, which is the strongest of the personalities. This person usually feels that they have all the ideas and stuff, but they also consider the security of others. So they usually try to protect groups of people. Number 9 would be the caregiver, and as the name states, they're very caring. They like to help others, and they always are available for others when they need them. And then you have the everyman, which is kind of more, it's in its own category basically because it's a more concentrated archetype, as it's family focused. This type of person is more simple, quiet, but they definitely need acceptance. So they're very much a people pleaser. Number 11, you have the jester. It's also known as the green man, the clown, the trickster. A jester is usually a male character in the archetypes, and what they live for is the mission. So I was explaining to Adam what the green man or the trickster or whatever, what they do is they bring balance through chaos. So like if you have gods warring, you have man and God warring, or man and man, whoever's the stronger, whoever's the smarter, the trickster goes in there and incites chaos, and they basically bring the battle to a level playing ground. Then number 12, you have the lover. Don't let the name fool you because it's the first characteristic in the masculine, and it represents youthful idolism. And by loving, it means all ways of love. So it means loving in your faith, loving your God, loving your friends, loving your family, loving a partner. Any type of love is encompassed in this type of characteristic archetype.
So one of the points that you made earlier is that these archetypes are present in every person, moment to moment, day to day. And that it isn't just that if you're an outlaw, then you are not a magician. Like, you will have outlaw experiences throughout the day, and you will impose magician-like qualities at another time throughout the day. Is that it's very...
Well, maybe not in a day.
Of our soul work, between the light and the dark, is that these things are going to be producing and presenting themselves dependent throughout. And so you register or resonate with the sage first and foremost. I probably resonate with the trickster.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about.
I would say like trickster, outlaw, everyman probably are my primary keys.
See, and I would have thought you as a creator, because you're a sculptor, as one of your primary ones.
Creator definitely registers too. Yeah, seeing beauty in all things and understanding like even bizarre modalities as being something, I could see that.
I resonate with the caregiver and the sage. sometimes the hero, but I mean, even more than the hero, I think I'm more in the creative.
Yeah.
But so again, not day to day, I don't think, because I don't think you're going to go through all 12 of these in a day. But in your lifetime, yes, you're going to go back and forth between each of these because, and I mean, in just today, I mean, I was a creator because I was doing my job, you know, and I'm converting material. So that's me creating.
Yeah.
I wasn't really a ruler today or an outlaw. I wasn't really an explorer, but the magician part, because I was seeking knowledge all day. I was trying to do research, listening to things all day, listening to the archetypes, chakras, the hero's journey. Now, Carl Jung didn't create the hero's journey. I can't remember the name of the guy who did, but he took Carl Jung's works and he basically broke each of these down. And they each have journeys of their own, and their journey's representational of your life. But in the hero's journey, you have a character, they fight their destiny. Basically, let's reference Star Wars here, okay? Because when you go to the new trilogy, the Disney trilogy, the reason why a lot of fans didn't like it is it basically copied the original trilogy. So in A New Hope, you have the character Luke. He's given his destiny. Now he wants to fight that destiny, and he don't want to believe it. He don't want to believe he's made for something better. And it actually takes the death of a character as his catalyst to make him embrace and choose to go on the path of his hero's journey. And in the hero's journey, there's always many obstacles, and these are life-changing obstacles that when you overcome, it makes you a better person. So looking at in faith, right, you have Siddhartha Gautama, the first Buddha. You have Jesus Christ or Yeshua or Yahusha, however you want to refer to him. You have Krishna, and all of these characters went on a hero's journey, and they did things that didn't just benefit themselves, but it benefited humanity. You know, even looking at Achilles or even Hercules, right? Their journeys caused something great for humanity. It wasn't just for themselves. And so I don't know, with that, I kind of want to get into the chakras just a little bit. I told Adam, this is one that's going to take a long time when we start getting into it, because there's a lot of things that affect your chakras, like how you eat, what could boost them, what raises your vibration, what lowers them. We talked about that all being maybe in another episode. Because I just wanted to go over the
We've just touched on it, but I feel like today and this time of the year is unique because we follow Mary Ducina by Lighting the Void, and she always has like very profound insights as to where it is you are, who you are, the way that you act and respond to things. And so in the season of Scorpio via Delaine, she described this time of the season as to be very detective-like. And so the detective energy is very much like the sage archetype, in which case I think that after having broken down the archetypes, it seems like a perfect fold. Or if you have like one transparency over another sheet of information, if you have the archetypes and then you overlay the chakras with that, I think that the two kind of go hand in hand.
And they do. They absolutely do. I mean, because the archetypes are more, it's in our subconscious, whereas the chakras, especially if you're opening them, you have to do this consciously, because your chakras aren't just going to be open and flowing subconsciously. If that were the case, then everybody would be able to open their chakras.
Yeah.
And mind you, and I want to bring this up right now, Adam, because you and I were talking about this, and I think it's a big misconception when it comes to chakras, is that people believe that they can concentrate all their strength on trying to open their third eye, but they're not realizing that you have these other 6 prior to that chakra that you have to align and balance first, because they are, okay, now we're going to get into something more esoteric a little bit, okay? Each of the chakras are a spinning wheel. And with each one, think of them as spinning gears. So without one spinning, they're not all going to spin. So you can't just make your bottom root chakra spin and then concentrate on the third eye and all the other chakras are going to spin in between. It don't work that way.
Yeah.
It goes in a straight line like the Kundalini. Well, that don't go in a straight line. It's weaving. through the chakras, but it is going upward ascension. So you have to go, first chakra is your root chakra. It's represented by the color red, because the chakras are broken down to the 7 colors that come out of the light spectrum. All 7 colors in the rainbow.
Yeah.
So starting with the root chakra, you have red. It is represented in our survival instinct. So if you're wearing I guess we could get into it a little bit. It's at the base of the spine. Some of the stones that help strengthen the root chakra are red jasper and hematite. So basically what I'm saying is if you wear a lot of red, or you're around a lot of red lights, red paintings, whatever the case may be, then you're going to have that survival instinct in you all the time. You're always going to be in survival mode, survival of the fittest, because that was one of our traits coming out of, if out of fear caused evolution, essentially, is what they're saying, that it causes us to grow, basically. And with having a survival instinct, it caused us to become predators. And that's what made us the top predator ourselves.
And that's interesting because when you mentioned hematite, I had thought that hematite is a naturally magnetic mineral. And so there at the root chakra, you have associated with magnetism. It factors in pretty well with like the rest of the understandings of it.
And then you have the second one, which is the sacral chakra, represented by the color orange. This is representational of creativity for us, and is located in the hips. The crystals that represent it are tiger's eye, and if I mess up the pronunciations of these, forgive me, but it's carnasian, I believe is what I wrote down.
Sounds close enough.
And then number 3, you have the solar plexus chakra. It's represented by the color yellow. It is willpower, which that's crazy to me because in the Green Lantern, right, willpower is green.
Yellow
is fear.
Yeah.
This is located 2 inches below your navel, and is represented by the crystals citrine, calcite, and tiger's eye. So you see, tiger's eye actually can represent a few of the chakras. Number 4 is your heart chakra, which is represented by the color green, and it represents love. And you can either use green adventurine or rose quartz for a crystal to power that chakra. Number 5, you have the throat chakra, which is blue. This represents expression. It controls the throat, and the crystals for that would be sodalite and apatite. And number 6 would be your third eye chakra, which is the one everyone seems to be most concerned about. But it is important. It's just, I wouldn't say it's the most important. It is very important, but it's not the most important. I mean, they're all important in their own ways. And these are basically like dimensions within ourselves that you're opening up. And when you start opening up, you start reaching a higher vibration. So in the third eye chakra, it's represented by indigo, of course. And the indigo is a very sacred color. That's why it's not in the rainbow for the people that are doing the gay rights movement. Remember, I told you that they only have 6 colors in their rainbow because they don't do indigo, because indigo is so closely related to the faith, and it has a lot of representation with spirituality. So I guess not to fight with the church or whatever, they took the color out of the rainbow to not have, because of Joseph's rainbow colored coat, Yeah. And they didn't want to have any beef with the church, so they changed that. It represents intuition and wisdom. Obviously, it's in your pineal gland here, back behind your skull, in your brain. It's in a little crevice that looks like it's for a snake. It's represented by amethyst or lapis lazuli. Number 7 is your crown chakra, which is violet. It represents your spiritual connection. And this is the chakra that I corrected from the last video in our short on YouTube, is that when I said that there was only however many chakras in the body, well, I did say 7. So this one, it's not in the body. It actually exists right above your crown.
It's so the toroidal field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's represented by clear quartz or amethyst. So once you balance these chakras, you're raising your vibration. Now, this ties into what we talked about with Dave, Revelation 12, and I brought up the 144,000. What that's actually talking about, it's not talking about numbers of people. It's talking about the frequency that we need to vibrate at. So the key to reaching heaven is seeking within ourselves, because heaven is not a place neither here nor there. Remember, the Messiah tells this. And it doesn't exist in a place. It's not here on earth. If you can't find the kingdom within yourself, then you were never meant to find it at all. And that is a statement more or less for people who are really going to understand that, because seeking within is what it's all about. I was telling Adam about this. If you're a Christian, you're seeking the Christ within, that's why they call it intellect, intels. The more that you look outside of yourself, the more you can hear those voices saying that you're not good enough, saying that you're not smart enough, or maybe I was born under this sign, so I'm not meant to go do those things. That is when you look outside of yourself instead of looking within, through meditation and all the great, I don't know if I'd call them philosophers, more like sages, I guess. I'd call them sages, you know? You have the Buddhists, you have the yogis, you even have the Messiah. You have all these people that told us to look within ourselves. And, I guess that kind of brings us to do you want me to get into the 7 Hermetic Principles, at least touch on it? So that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, Adam shared a picture of it in a podcast. I think it was the last one. We didn't really read it, and it was just on the screen. We always talk about it. I just at least want to put them out there so that when we do talk about these, then you guys have something to go back and reference. So the 7 Hermetic Principles are what the book The Kabbalion is about. Hermes Trismegistus wrote it. Also one of the books that the Rosicrucians go by, and one of the books that came out of the mystery schools of Egypt. The first in the 7 Hermetic Principles is the principle of mentalism, which is the all is mind and the universe is mental. And because without that, you have to have thoughts. Without thoughts, ideas can't come from thoughts. So this is the principle of mentalism, right? Is that God is the mind, right? Is what we were discussing before with the consciousness, the higher consciousness, the all. If what the mistranslation from Genesis chapter 1 is that the word is God and God is the word. No, it said logos, and logos means mind. So essentially it's translated that in the beginning there was the mind, and consciousness is God or the all. That's how it should actually be translated. So you have the second principle of vibration, which is nothing rests, everything moves, and everything vibrates, which is true. Everything is at a vibrational frequency. This is what the all or God used on, right? 432 hertz, that vibrational frequency that traveled throughout the universe, resonating and creating matter, because all matter vibrates. And remember, you and I were talking about this the other day, Adam.
Yeah, we got into it with the Philadelphia experiment, is that it phased its atomic vibration out of sync with the rest of reality. That's kind of what they speculate happened there.
Exactly. And so then with the third one is the principle of correspondence. And you get more into the saying that we've always said on the show, as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without, as without, so within. That is where that explores that more, because, and this goes into the next principle, the fourth principle of polarity, where everything is dual and has poles or opposites. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. So we were discussing this, I believe, on one of the podcasts, where you have cold and hot. This is the best way to describe this, because they're the same thing. They're both temperature. You cannot say what is what other than they vary by degrees. They're the exact same thing, just varying by degrees. So a dual thing in a single thing, right? So it's temperature, but it's also hot and it's cold, varying by degrees. So then the fifth principle is the principle of rhythm, where everything flows out and in, and everything has its tides, and all things rise and fall, and the pendulum swings. Everything is basically like Isaac Newton's, whatever is in motion stays in motion. It's going to carry that same amount of motion. So if you have this negative energy right here that you're carrying with you, it's going to swing throughout your entire day like a pendulum, right? You're just swinging that energy with you because you're carrying it with you, and it's in motion because everything is vibrating, which is the principle of vibration. And obviously all these principles tie into each other. That's why they're the 7 principles, and why we were discussing in that podcast why they came up with the term hermetically sealed is that they all reference each other and reaffirm each other in such a way that is the essential universal knowledge.
Closed circuit. It's interesting, just a little bit of an aside, is that we often get into etymology, like the definition of words and the origin of words. And like you're getting into the origin of the term hermeticism, and why we say something is hermetically sealed is that it is a perfect seal. It has a perfect friction, contact to contact seal, is that nothing can get in. It's a perfect closed system. In terms of etymology, just now when you were saying as above, so below, as below, so above, I'm wondering if the origins of SO is an SEW, as though to sew pieces of fabric together, or as though to sow a field. And
it is,
anytime that somebody says so, people say so a lot. My older brother certainly says it as often as I say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thanks, fans. Is that when you say so, it's like a crutch or a pause or an and it seems to sew 2 pieces of your conversation together when you use it.
Well, it actually means that, but it means a lot of other things, like so what I was telling you before with the duality and what we've talked about on the podcast with the Kabbalistic tree of life, and it's also in the Freemason Royal Arches, okay, is you have the duality.
Yeah.
And so as above, you have Yeshua, okay? The Hebrew, it's more like this, I guess. And as below is Lucifer, right? And you have to find this duality between the two. That's why walking the middle path, which I was stressing in our previous podcast where we talked about the Kabbalistic tree of life. In that, it's telling you to walk the middle path. In the Royal Arches of the Freemasons, it's telling you to walk the middle path. In Buddhism, they tell you to walk the middle path. Even in the faith, it's telling you to walk in the middle path. Like I was explaining to Adam the other day, is that when you do things, a lot of people do things out of the reason for karma. They think, oh, if I don't do this, then karma's going to come back on me. Or if I do this, the karma's not going to be good for the situation. But if you're doing it for karma, karma walks the left path and karma walks the right path. So you're choosing a path by choosing to follow karma instead of just saying, you know what, I'm here. This person needs my help. I'm in abundance. I have food. I have air. I'm walking. I'm living. Right? You don't have to have things or money or to be in complete abundance. You don't have to have those things to be secure. But when you have enough and a person needs your help, you help them for the sake that you're able to help that person, not because you think it's going to be good karma for you later on down the line, not because you think it's going to get you into heaven. Those are the wrong reasons. And so that is walking the middle path, which is very hard to do because you're going to want to lean to one side or the other, which is why we were talking about the pillars. You have the 2 entities that are influencing you to go one way or the other. And there can be too much good being bad or too much bad being bad. I mean, that's why they say to walk the middle path. It's like what they say with addictions, everything in moderation, because too much of anything could be a bad thing. And so that brings us to the principle of cause and effect, which is what I was saying in the previous podcast where we talked about these. Everything flows out and everything has a cause, or everything cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. So if you say, I don't believe in the 7 Hermetic Principles because it just don't make sense or whatever. By definition, you're basically believing in that cause and effect, right? Because what you're saying, it has a cause and there's going to be effect because of that cause. You don't have to believe it. It's there. And when you acknowledge it that way, you're acknowledging that you're accepting these principles, whether you know it or not. And the last one, number 7, is the principle of gender. And gender is in everything, everywhere, has its masculine and feminine principles. And again, like we said, this is more to do with creation. It's not talking about so much sexes, like male and female sexes. It's talking about the energies.
Yeah. The divine feminine and the divine masculine, for sure. That's always something that everybody needs to be aware of in all things. And it's something that we lost in the English language, is that in all of the romantic languages, and if I'm not mistaken, what defines them as romantic is that they have masculine and feminine associated with every single word. Like il and el, or la, and I can't remember what the other ones.
No, it's la and el in Spanish.
La and el, and then il and el in French.
Well, and Russian does it too. So you have, like, let's say, because they consider ram or sheep very dumb animals, so it's a very high insult, right?
Right.
And ovsa is a sheep, and that's the feminine, what you would say to a female if you were trying to, or if you were saying it in the effeminate way. But if you were insulting a woman, you would say it ovsa. And if you were insulting a man, you would say baranov for a ram.
Yeah.
You know, and so each thing that you say, it has a different thing to it, just like in Spanish, that makes it masculine or feminine in the words. I think only English is more like an androgynous language, you know. None of the words are really masculine or feminine.
It's a female dog, and a vessel, be it an aircraft or a boat, is always referred to as a she. But those don't really affect the same sort of qualities that the other languages, like, you will have to have the proper supposition of whatever it is you're saying in either the masculine or the feminine.
Well, and actually, I'm glad you brought up the boat, because the reason why they actually have a differential for, like, cars, boats, anything like that, and I've heard it somewhere, is the reason why we always refer to them as she's is because things come out of them.
All right.
People come out of it. Cargo comes out of it.
It's kind of awkward.
But so, and yes, bitch is a female dog, and that did come from the English language. But I don't feel that we differentiate a lot of our words the same way that a lot of languages do.
No, not at all. And it's one of the greatest tricks ever. It's kind of why we're in the sticky wicket that we are today of androgyny and confusion as to what is associated with what. Like, it doesn't matter if you're trans, it doesn't matter if you're a furry, it doesn't matter if you're foxkin or whatever. Those energies, masculine or feminine, still apply within that paradigm.
Yeah, and so here's the thing with I don't know if I'm gonna get into this, Adam, about the Trinity, okay?
Yeah.
And it's important because I've explained it before in here, where we're talking about Ra and we're talking about Isis, right? We're talking about the sun, you talk about the moon. On the 2 hemispheres of your brain, you have masculine, feminine. Now, when you are reaching the duality, when you're walking the middle path, so Adam and I, we're masculine. We're both males. That means we need to have a feminine spirit. And at that point, now we're walking the middle. Then we need to meet a woman who is feminine with a masculine spirit. And when those two come together, there's an eclipse that happens, which generates the electricity, which is the L. And creation comes from that, which is the children walking the middle path. And from those children is the growth. Remember, I was telling you, Adam, so let's get into this right here, is that we are the fallen ones. We're the trees. We're all of that. That's where all this knowledge came from. So Adam and I were talking about astrology. And as far as humans know, we know that astrology came from the Vedics, but we don't know where it came from before that. And I was telling Adam because people have forgotten. And we want to say that there's fallen ones over there, and that these people they're mixed with us and we're mixed with them. At this point, there's been so much gene mixing that all of us are part of the fallen ones. We were all cast out. So the reason why I want to get into this is Adam and I were talking about it, and I tripped last weekend. on some mushrooms, and I had a very, very phenomenal experience. So prior to this, I was meditating, doing a Kundalini meditation, third eye activation meditation. And the day before, I was telling Adam I did the Wim Hof breathing technique to release DMT into your brain naturally. And during that experience, I realized that I could hold my breath longer than I thought. And there's a point where you're exhaling all the way out of your lungs till there's no more air. And then you hold. And you're supposed to hold for 1 minute and 45 seconds. And this is after taking a series of deep breaths in and out, 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. And as you exhale and you're holding, at the minute marker, I start freaking out. Your body's just freaking out. And you're like getting
It feels like your heart is stopping. Like
yeah.
When you exhale that deeply, you feel it in your heart and it's like, oh, buddy, I don't like this. Like, woo.
Feels like your veins are going to burst and everything. You just feel real claustrophobic. And I remember I was doing a guided meditation. He says, just be in the moment, just concentrate and feel in the moment. And the minute I relaxed and I was in the moment, I held my breath for 30 seconds longer when I already felt like I was going to pass out. So I didn't make it to the 1 minute and 45 seconds. I did it for 1 minute and 30 seconds. But considering I didn't even think I could do that last 30 seconds, and I was able to hold on just by calming myself. And so then I did a meditation that day before I took the mushrooms. I did a Kundalini meditation. And from that point that I took them after, I just listened to 963 hertz. It was a meditation song for oneness with God. And in that moment, I actually spent a moment with the all. And it's not like something you could see. Like I was explaining it to Adam, it's just a room, a vibration, and you can feel, and I could feel it resonating in me. So, when your jaw gets tight and it locks up and you feel that twinge, or like you eat something sour and you feel that tingle in your jaw, or when you're shivering, any of those things, that's the vibration. And then I began to see around me, even looking at the toothpaste container, I couldn't read the words because they were moving. And then when I realized, because I thought they were moving like a wave, and no, they're not moving like a wave, they're a vibration. And because they were a vibration, vibrating at such a rate, it was hard to see until I could focus straight in on it, and then I could read it again. But in that moment I was spending with y'all, it changed me. It was another moment, like the moment I've talked about before, when I wanted to kill myself, and I felt the presence of what I say was the Messiah, and I heard that voice that said, "I'm here for you, brother." And that's the only other time I've ever experienced this. But in that, I felt the most calm, the most peace, and so much power. I had a Kundalini awakening during that trip, and so much power involved. But it made me resonate with a different outlook on life, and it made me feel more okay. Like I was telling Adam, it made me realize that whatever they're doing, they're not going to be able to do. All they're trying to do, though, is maybe disrupt the waves in such a way that they could disrupt it for a second and maybe cause something that they're trying to. But the
ball or the cathedral, what they're trying to do?
Yeah, they.
Right.
Because the all, it's everything. It's in everything. It's everywhere.
It's them as well.
Yeah. And
I had an epiphany. And so my epiphany actually is pretty common with yours, which no surprise there. Like you and me, we couldn't be more different, but we have a lot of these common experiences. And I won't really get into what it had to do, except for my 7 around the birthday, is that I had an epiphany about that. And then a lot of other epiphanies stemmed forth from it. Maybe I was having a contact high from you within the same mycological network of mushrooms. Maybe I just piggybacked off of your trip and that's where I got the insight. I don't really know where it came from, but I was thinking about the cabal and the cathedral and everything it is that they're doing. And despite the fact that they're doing it in the age of Aquarius, and the age of Aquarius is all about the veil thinning and then being lifted all together, is that I figured that the age of Aquarius was by definition a good thing, is that when the veil thins and is lifted, then we will see them for what they truly are and can act otherwise. But then it dawned on me that no, that's exactly what they're planning for, is that they're priming everybody for when the veil is lifted and we see light and darkness, good and evil, and they just have us so primed that we choose the left-handed path. I don't know how it works.
Yeah,
with my hand in the video. I always feel like things get inverted. But that when the veil is lifted, we will see them for what they truly are. It's just that they obscure and prevent us from taking the other path that we're more naturally inclined to do. But I also think that the moment that comes, then everybody will just be like, oh, I get it now. Like it was all just a farce, and we'll just organically be able to leave them all. There won't be any more like going to war for them. There won't be any more making weapons for them. There won't be any more trafficking falsely printed currencies within central banking institutions. Like we will just no longer have any belief in that, and we will be able to fall back on ourselves. I think that when that penultimate moment happens, people will be able to make the right decision. Whereas, when you look at statistics, what people are saying now is that 85% of the world are followers. I think that that's what the age of Aquarius is about, is that thinning and lifting of the veil and seeing truth. The cabal or the cathedral or the Illuminati, the they, whatever it is you want to call them, that is their moment that they finally get their time in the sun, and the sun is truth. And they will be finally in truth as evil, and they will be known as evil. And there will be those that take that path because they will have further carnal or physical benefits. Whereas I think that not 85% of people, but 90% of people will choose to just be their own human selves. This also worked into an epiphany that I had, is that my entire life I have felt bereft and interrupted and isolated from everybody else. Like I honestly thought, for the majority of my developing years, probably until RimCAD and I met y'all, and probably most especially you, is that I always thought that everybody else could read minds except for me, and that nobody was letting me in on the big joke, is that I couldn't read minds like everybody else. And that manifested itself from the experience that I had, that I never really had a magnetic influence or drive or connection with people. Whereas everybody else I knew, they could walk out in the street and have an interaction with somebody, and I could sense the magnetism between them, be it ideas, be it romantic, be it confrontation. There was always these varying polarities interacting with each other. And so I thought that I was broken in that regard, and like a machine or a ghost, I simply didn't have that. The epiphany that I had that kind of factored into all of this just the other day is that it's all about toroidal fields, which we were talking about earlier, right? Is it when we're talking about the chakras and all of that, and being aware of your archetype and being able to work within and without via being aware of that, is that the toroidal field is the magnetic valence that we have that courses through our entire bodies. Like when you're talking about size of paths, and the middle path, that is the toroidal field that stems outside of us and creates almost like an egg. They sort of depict it with the spear of destiny, or whatever they call it in Donnie Darko. That's like something that pierces between toroidal fields. The smaller a toroidal field is, the more powerful the valence, and probably the more narcissistic and self-absorbed a person is, which would explain a lot, is because the smaller it is, the more powerful, the more magnetic. This is probably why people are always so smitten with psychopaths or wholesale serial killers, right? Because they have a very tight, very powerful, high velocity toroidal field. It's a hearth, it's warm, it's magnetic, it draws in everything around it, like the event horizon of a black hole. The epiphany I had the other day is that I do have a toroidal field. I think that it just so happens to span the Earth, or is the same as the Earth. Like I'm plugged into the Earth's as my own, or mine is just as big as the Earth, as like an extra stratosphere, ionosphere, or otherwise. And that epiphany for me made like a really big difference for the way that I've like been struggling and interacting with the way that my life is going, is that I don't have like these quick tit for tat exchanges and interactions with people. I have always been looking for human interaction, and I couldn't find the words for it until just recently after this epiphany, is that whereas I see that everybody else is having human transactions, I have always like, I cannot transact with people. I'm not going to transact with gossip. I'm not going to transact with projecting narcissism. I'm not going to transact with buying into your narcissism. I am seeking to interact with you. And so because I felt like a ghost, or I felt like an automaton or a machine, people will have like a visceral reaction to me almost the second I start fucking talking, and I never really was able to figure out why. And I think that that's it, is that everybody else is working in a commerce and like a community of transacting with each other, like tit for tat. I give you some gossip, you interact with my ego and my narcissism. I project my narcissism, you witness it, and then, you know, like transact with my narcissism, whereas there's a different way, and it's simple human interaction, which I think also speaks to what you validate for me is the way that our relationship has always been, is that we've always felt to be in a fog in most social interactions until like you and I could shoot the shit and just talk about whatever. Is that you and I, you can talk about your coworkers, you can talk about your relationships, but it ain't gossip. It's an interaction of you sharing the information and the interactions that you have with me in a way that you hope to have like an equivocal interaction back from.
Hey, Adam, I'm about to drive right now. Do you want to cut it and I'll call you back when I get home? We can try to finish it because I want to get into the Korea thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody.
I'll hit you when I get home. That way we could record a little more.
Yeah, buddy.
All right.
Adios.
Later.